Have you ever wondered if justice can truly arrive decades after a crime, when memories have faded, witnesses have aged, and the trail has gone completely cold? In 1988, an 8-year-old girl named April Tinsley disappeared while walking to a friend's house in Fort Wayne, Indiana. 3 days later, her body was discovered in a ditch, and what followed was 30 years of dead ends, haunting messages from her killer, and a community living in fear. But then in 2018, something remarkable happened. Modern forensic technology reached back through 3 decades of silence and finally gave April's family the answer they'd been waiting for. This is the story of how cutting-edge DNA analysis and genealogy databases solved one of Indiana's most infamous cold cases, proving that even the coldest cases can be brought back to life. On April 1, 1988, Good Friday, 8-year-old April Tinsley asked her mother if she could walk to a friend's house in their quiet Fort Wayne neighborhood. It was a journey she'd made many times before, just a few blocks away. Her mother said yes, never imagining it would be the last time she'd see her daughter alive. When April didn't arrive at her friend's house and darkness began to fall, panic set in. The community immediately mobilized, launching an extensive search that involved hundreds of volunteers combing through the area. For 3 agonizing days, April's family clung to hope, but on April 4th, that hope was shattered. A jogger discovered April's body in a ditch approximately 20 miles north of Fort Wayne in a rural area of DeKalb County. She had been sexually assaulted and suffocated. The autopsy revealed she had died within hours of her abduction. Law enforcement collected DNA evidence from the crime scene, a crucial detail that would prove invaluable decades later. In 1988, DNA profiling was still in its infancy, having only been used in criminal investigations for a few years. The technology existed, but the databases and analytical capabilities we have today were simply not available. Investigators had a DNA profile of April's killer, but without a match in any database or a suspect to compare it against, the case quickly went cold. The Fort Wayne community was devastated and terrified. Parents became hypervigilant, and the sense of safety that had characterized their neighborhoods evaporated overnight. But the killer wasn't finished haunting them. In 2004, 16 years after April's murder, something deeply disturbing happened. 4 handwritten notes began appearing around Fort Wayne, each one written on a lined piece of paper and placed in conspicuous locations. The notes were found attached to girls' bicycles in different neighborhoods. Each note contained the same chilling message, written in crude handwriting. The killer took responsibility for April's murder and taunted the police, saying he had been leaving these notes and that authorities couldn't catch him. The message was signed and included details that only the killer would know. Law enforcement confirmed through DNA analysis that whoever had licked the envelopes and left these notes was indeed April's murderer. The killer was brazenly reaching out, demonstrating that he felt untouchable. Then, in 2009, more notes appeared. This time, 3 more messages were discovered in various locations around Fort Wayne, including one left in a plastic bag on a house's front porch. The taunting continued with similar handwriting and the same disturbing content. Once again, DNA testing confirmed these notes came from April's killer. The perpetrator was actively engaging with the community and law enforcement, seemingly confident that he would never be identified. Despite extensive investigation, media coverage, and public appeals, the case remained frustratingly unsolved. Traditional detective work had reached its limits. Investigators had a DNA profile, they had handwriting samples, and they had witnesses who had seen April near the time of her abduction, but none of these elements had led to an arrest. The breakthrough came in 2018, 30 years after April's murder, when forensic genealogy emerged as a revolutionary investigative tool. This technique had recently gained national attention with the capture of the Golden State Killer in California just months earlier. Forensic genealogy works by taking DNA evidence from a crime scene and uploading it to public genealogy databases where people have submitted their own DNA to trace their family history. Instead of looking for an exact match, which would require the perpetrator to have already submitted their DNA to these databases, investigators look for partial matches indicating distant relatives. From there, they build family trees, narrow down potential suspects, and ultimately identify the perpetrator. The Fort Wayne Police Department, in collaboration with the FBI and Parabon Nanolabs, a company specializing in DNA technology, decided to apply this emerging technique to April's case. They took the DNA profile collected from the 1988 crime scene and the subsequent notes and uploaded it to GDmatch, a public genealogy database. The results were promising. The DNA matched with several distant relatives, providing investigators with a genetic roadmap. Genealogists working on the case spent weeks meticulously constructing family trees, following branches through multiple generations, and identifying potential suspects who fit the profile. The investigation eventually led them to John D. Miller, a man who had lived in Fort Wayne in 1988 and still resided in the area. Miller was 59 years old, married with children, and had been living what appeared to be an ordinary life in a trailer park just a few miles from where April had been abducted. He had never been on law enforcement's radar during the original investigation. To confirm their suspicions, detectives needed a direct DNA sample from Miller. In July 2018, they conducted surveillance and collected discarded items from Miller's trash, a practice that is legal and commonly used in police investigations. The DNA recovered from these items was sent for analysis. On July 15, 2018, the results came back. It was a definitive match. John D. Miller's DNA matched the DNA collected from April Tinsley's body in 1988 and from the taunting notes left in 2004 and 2009. Detectives immediately moved to arrest him. When confronted with the evidence, Miller confessed. He admitted to abducting April as she walked to her friend's house, sexually assaulting her and killing her. He also confessed to leaving the notes years later, confirming what investigators had long suspected. He expressed no clear motive beyond his own predatory impulses, offering little insight into why he had taken an innocent child's life and terrorized a community for decades. Miller was charged with multiple counts including murder, child molestation, and criminal confinement. In 2019, he pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 80 years in prison. For April's family, the arrest brought a complex mixture of relief, grief, and closure. April's mother, Janet Tinsley, who had spent 30 years searching for answers, finally had the truth. She had never given up hope that her daughter's killer would be found, attending vigils, speaking to media, and keeping April's memory alive. The community of Fort Wayne, which had lived under the shadow of this unsolved crime for 3 decades, could finally exhale. The April Tinsley case became one of the landmark examples of how modern forensic genealogy could solve seemingly impossible cold cases. It demonstrated that DNA evidence, carefully preserved and cataloged, could remain viable for decades and eventually lead to justice through technologies that didn't exist when the crimes were committed. The success of this case inspired law enforcement agencies across the United States to revisit their cold case files, particularly those involving sexual assaults and murders where DNA evidence had been collected but never matched to a suspect. Within just a few years of the Golden State Killer and April Tinsley breakthroughs, forensic genealogy has been used to solve hundreds of cold cases nationwide. However, the technique has also sparked important debates about privacy, consent, and the ethical use of genealogy databases. Most people who submit their DNA to sites like GeneMatch do so to discover their ancestry or find long-lost relatives, not to potentially implicate family members in criminal investigations. These discussions continue as the technology becomes more widespread, balancing the pursuit of justice against individual privacy rights. Yet for families like April Tinsley's, these concerns are secondary to the profound relief of finally knowing the truth and seeing justice served. April's case reminds us that advances in science and technology can reach backward through time, illuminating dark corners that seemed permanently shadowed. It shows us that cold cases are never truly closed, that evidence carefully preserved can speak across decades, and that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still arrive. The 8-year-old girl who walked to a friend's house on a spring day in 1988 and never came home finally received justice in 2018, and her killer, who thought himself untouchable, learned that time and technology would eventually catch up with him. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power of persistence and modern science, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button and join our community. We bring you true crime stories that matter, cases that demonstrate both the darkest aspects of human nature and the relentless pursuit of justice. Like this video if you believe that no case should ever be forgotten, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the cases that changed criminal investigations forever. Together, we keep these stories alive and honor the victims who deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.